The last thing I saw was the red glow of the taillights disappearing around the corner. I stood there, frozen on a dark cobblestone street in a small town outside Venice, holding nothing but my purse and a shallow breath. I kept waiting for the sound of the car reversing. For the doors to open. For Gabriel to shout out something, anything, that would make this feel like a twisted joke. But all I heard was laughter. Faint and cruel. "Let's see how she finds her way home now," someone chuckled from inside the car, just before it vanished. At first, I didn't move. Couldn't. I kept thinking, this can't be real. Gabriel wouldn't do this. Not my husband. We've been together for 15 years. He knows I don't speak Italian. My phone barely works here. He wouldn't just leave me, like this. I reached into my bag, pulled out my phone, and hit his name. No answer. Called again. Then again. 27 calls in the next hour. Every single one ignored. The panic didn't come all at once. It seeped in slowly, like fog rolling over the harbor. First confusion. Then embarrassment. Then dread. It was almost midnight. I was in a foreign country. Alone. And for the first time in years, I realized I had no idea who the man I married truly was. 1 month later, Gabriel would find me again. But by then, I was living in a place he never expected, with people he couldn't understand, and wearing a sun-dyed linen dress I had stitched with my own 2 hands. He stood there staring, stunned, like I was a stranger. And maybe I was. Because the woman he abandoned in Italy no longer existed. This is not just a story about betrayal. It's about freedom. About the unexpected beauty that blooms when you're forced to grow in wild, foreign soil. You see, Gabriel thought leaving me behind would break me. But all it did was set me free. Before we continue, have you ever been left behind by someone you trusted the most? What would you do if your own husband left you stranded in a foreign country, alone, broke, and humiliated? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to hear from you. What country are you watching from? Have you ever had to start over from nothing? Your stories matter. Your voice matters. And on this channel, we listen. If this part touched something in you, stay with me. Because what happened next, even I couldn't have predicted. And don't forget, subscribe to EN True Tales so you never miss a story that just might change the way you see your own. Now, let's get back to Alexis. Back when I first met Gabriel, he was magnetic. The kind of man who walked into a room and shifted the air. Tall, charismatic, with a voice like velvet and opinions sharp enough to carve stone. He was an architect, well-respected, already published in design journals by the time he turned 30. I was a designer too, though not the kind that made headlines. I worked with natural textures, earth tones, restored old furniture and gave forgotten things new life. I believed in beauty with soul. Gabriel believed in control, precision, perfection. At first, our differences attracted us. I softened his rigid edges, and he pushed me to think bigger. When we were good, we were art. But somewhere along the way, he stopped seeing me as his equal and started treating me more like an accessory. It was subtle at first. He'd insist on managing our finances, "It's just easier this way." He'd make little comments when I spent money on craft materials. He said things like, "That doesn't really fit the aesthetic anymore," when I wore the linen jumpsuit I loved. Then came the bigger sacrifices. I turned down a job at a boutique design firm because he was overwhelmed at work and needed me present. I stopped taking commissions so I could help manage our social calendar, our home, the dinner parties, the client receptions. In public, we were the picture of success. Boston power couple. Our brownstone was featured in a local magazine. The interior was flawless, sleek, modern, emotionless. Everything Gabriel wanted. But in private, I was disappearing. I stopped designing. Stopped creating. Stopped dreaming. I became a manager of his world. And the strange thing is, I didn't even realize it was happening. I told myself I was being supportive. That this was what love looked like, compromise. But deep down, I felt small. Like I had folded myself over and over to fit into a space I was never meant to shrink into. So when Gabriel announced we'd be going to Italy with his old college friends for a bonding getaway, I said yes, hoping maybe we'd reconnect. I didn't realize until too late, I wasn't being invited. I was being tolerated. The moment we landed, it became clear. His friends, all smug and polished, barely acknowledged me. One called me Gabriel's plus one like I didn't have a name. I laughed it off. Smiled through it. Pretended I didn't notice when Gabriel disappeared with them for hours, leaving me to wander piazzas alone. But I noticed. I noticed everything. I noticed how his eyes glazed over when I tried to talk about anything that wasn't about him. I noticed how he rolled them when I mentioned wanting to sketch the view from our hotel room. I noticed how, every time I reached for him, he took a step back. The night he left me, we had just finished dinner. He'd had too much wine. His friend Marco made another offhand joke about how high-maintenance American wives were. I finally snapped. You know what's exhausting? I said, too loud, too raw. Pretending I'm not invisible. Gabriel laughed. Actually laughed. You're being dramatic, Alexis. As usual. And then he turned his back and walked out. That was the last normal moment I had in Italy. Because the next time I saw him, he was getting into that car. And I was left standing on that cold street, holding a purse full of useless credit cards and a heart that had finally cracked all the way open. I don't remember how long I stood there after the car vanished. Time folded in on itself. The street lamp above me flickered, casting long shadows on the cobblestones. My breath caught in my throat, shallow and tight. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone, tapping Gabriel's name with numb fingers. No answer. Again. Again. By the 10th call, I was shaking. By the 20th, I was crying. By the 27th, I finally stopped. I texted, please tell me this is a joke. Then, where are you? Then, I'm scared. Then nothing. The messages turned green. Not delivered. Blocked. I sank onto the edge of a fountain, my thoughts spinning. People passed me, tourists, locals, all in their own worlds. I was invisible. I looked in my purse. Passport, still there. Phone, 22% battery. Wallet, €80 in cash, $37, and 2 expired airline vouchers. No credit cards. Gabriel had streamlined our finances months ago. Said he'd manage everything through a joint account. Gave me a single card for emergencies. And that card? It was in the suitcase. Which was in the trunk of the car. Panic rose like a wave, but I forced it down. Not here. Not in front of strangers. I wandered until I found a narrow alley with a wooden sign, Pensione Maria. A small inn above a bakery. The smell of warm bread barely masked the sting of my situation. The woman behind the counter didn't speak English, but when she saw my face, red, streaked with tears, she just nodded and handed me a key. Room 4. It was tiny. A twin bed, one window, a curtain swaying in the night breeze. I locked the door behind me, sat on the bed, and stared at the wall. I felt like a ghost. Not angry. Not even heartbroken. Just hollow. I curled up in my clothes, not even bothering to undress, and let the silence swallow me. That night, I dreamed I was underwater. Gabriel stood above me on a dock, looking down. I waved, kicked, begged. But he just turned, walked away, and left me sinking. I woke up gasping. Chest tight. Room spinning. My heart pounding like it was trying to escape. It was still dark. Still Italy. Still real. I opened the window and let the night air in. Somewhere, a dog barked. A church bell rang twice. 2 in the morning. I sat there until the sky began to turn gray, thinking of all the things I had ignored for too long. Gabriel's silences. His coldness. His cruelty wrapped in charm. And now this final, cruel punctuation mark. But what he didn't know, what even I didn't know yet, was that I had finally reached the bottom. And the only direction left was up. Morning in Italy didn't feel like a sunrise. It felt like exposure. When I stepped outside the pensione just after dawn, the world looked the same, cobblestone streets glistening from the early mist, cafe owners setting out chairs, the hum of scooters in the distance. But I felt like a shadow moving through someone else's life. My first thought was to find Gabriel. Somewhere inside me, beneath the humiliation, the fear, the slow-burning rage, there was still that tiny flicker of hope. That maybe he'd come back. Maybe it was all a mistake. I started walking. I went to every hotel his group had mentioned, every restaurant we'd visited. I even stood in front of the car rental booth at the train station, scanning every vehicle that pulled in. Nothing. By noon, I was at the police station. I tried to explain what happened, but without fluent Italian, my story came out fragmented and pitiful. A tourist abandoned by her husband? There was no crime. No theft. No violence. Just indifference. The officer took down my information, gave me a tight-lipped nod, and handed me a brochure about tourist assistance numbers. That was it. I walked out of the station and sat on the curb. Hot, hungry, exhausted. And then I did what I swore I wouldn't do. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number I hadn't used in years. My father's. It rang once. Twice. Then voicemail. I hung up. Because even if he answered, what would I say? Hi, Dad. Remember when you told me not to marry Gabriel? You were right. He left me in Italy. I'm broke, scared, and need help. Go ahead. Say it. Say, I told you so. No. I couldn't give him the satisfaction. Not yet. I returned to the pensione, climbed the stairs like someone carrying the weight of 1,000 regrets, and sat on the bed. My fingers curled around the diamond ring still on my finger. 2 carats. Classic cut. Gabriel gave it to me on our 5th anniversary in Paris. You're the only woman I'll ever build a life with, he'd said. Lies. I slipped it off and stared at it in the palm of my hand. Then I stood, walked out, and went 3 blocks down to a pawn shop with dusty windows and a bell that jingled when I stepped inside. The man behind the counter looked at the ring, then at me. You call your family, he said gently. This is not something you sell unless you must. I looked him dead in the eye. I must. He gave me 1,200 euros. It wasn't much, but it was more than hope. It was fuel. I walked to the bus station, past the ticket counter, and stood in front of a departure board. So many cities. So many directions. And then, like a whisper, it came to me. Greece. Years ago, I'd bookmarked a photo of a seaside village in a travel magazine. White houses climbing up cliffs. Blue doors. Olive trees swaying in the wind. I remembered thinking, if I ever need to disappear, that's where I'll go. I took a deep breath and approached the counter. The farthest coastal village in Greece you can get me to, I said. The woman blinked, then nodded slowly. Takes some time. But yes. We can do that. It would take 3 bus transfers, a ferry, and an overnight stop. I didn't hesitate. I bought the ticket. And with it, I bought a second chance at becoming someone I hadn't met yet. Not a wife. Not a burden. Just me. The last leg of the journey took me along a narrow, winding road clinging to the edge of a mountain. Below, the Aegean Sea shimmered like molten glass, its endless blue stretching to the horizon. I was crammed in the back of a faded green bus with cracked vinyl seats and no air conditioning, wedged between a woman holding a chicken in a basket and an old man chain-smoking with the windows closed. But I didn't care. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't looking behind me. 14 hours of travel had left me dizzy and sore. My backpack dug into my shoulders, and my legs felt like jelly. When the bus finally groaned to a stop at the edge of a sleepy Greek village, white houses stacked like sugar cubes along the hillside, I stepped off and immediately collapsed to my knees. Not from weakness. From release. The driver gave me a wary look and asked something in Greek. I managed a nod and a breathless Evcharisto. Thank you. It was all I knew. I dragged my bag down the dusty path toward the town square, but before I made it halfway, the ground tilted beneath me. My vision blurred. I remember reaching for the low wall of a garden. Then nothing. When I woke up, the first thing I saw was olive branches swaying gently above me. Sunlight filtered through them, warm and soft on my face. A woman hovered nearby, murmuring in Greek. Her eyes were kind, her skin weathered like sun-warmed leather. She placed a damp cloth on my forehead and offered a small glass of something that smelled like lemons and mint. Phosmo, Corey, she whispered. You are safe now, my girl. Her name was Elena. She and her husband Nikos had found me passed out near their grove. They didn't ask questions. They just took me in. Their home was small but full of life, ceramic bowls stacked high, tomatoes ripening in windows, olive oil bottles lined up like soldiers on the kitchen shelf. Elena spoke bits of English, enough to understand that I was alone, far from home, and in no shape to leave. She didn't press for details. She only said, stay. Rest. Eat. And I did. The bed they gave me was firm and smelled faintly of lavender. The meals, simple stews, grilled bread, soft cheese, olives soaked in herbs, were better than any banquet I'd had in Boston. On my third day there, I offered to help. No guest works, Elena insisted, but I could see the strain in her hands, the curve of her back from years bent over trees. So I followed her anyway, into the olive grove. She laughed the first time I tried to rake the olives. Boston hands, she said, shaking her head, showing me the blisters. Need Greek skin. We worked in silence, side by side. Nico sang softly under his breath, a melody as old as the hills. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a decoration. I didn't feel invisible. I felt useful. In the evenings, I helped Elena in the kitchen. She taught me how to cook with instinct instead of recipes. No measuring, she'd say, pouring oil until it felt right, tasting as she went. Back in Boston, I'd prided myself on precision. Here, I was learning something deeper: intuition, trust, presence. We roasted lamb with rosemary, baked bread in an outdoor oven, and made honey-sweet pastries that stuck to our fingers and made us laugh like girls. One afternoon, as we sat shelling almonds in the shade, Elena told me about her daughter Sophia, who had moved to Australia years ago and never looked back. She sends postcards, Elena said, her smile fading. But the house is quiet now. She looked at me then, long and soft. You remind me of her, she whispered. I didn't know what to say. But I felt something in my chest shift. A kind of belonging I hadn't felt in years. Maybe ever. By the third week, I no longer needed translation to understand the rhythm of village life. I woke up with the sunrise, helped Elena hang laundry that smelled of olive soap and mountain air, and walked barefoot through the orchard with a basket in hand. My palms had roughened. My back ached in new ways. But I was stronger, inside and out. Each day brought a new task. Picking, sorting, pressing. I learned the steps of turning olives into liquid gold. Elena let me design new labels for the glass bottles, hand-drawn sketches of the grove and simple lettering, Ladies' Oys, Oil of Life. She smiled so wide when she saw them, her eyes turned glassy. You have gift, she said, tapping the paper, then my heart. Use it. I hadn't heard those words in years. With Elena and Nikos, there was no need to explain who I used to be. They didn't care about the townhouse in Boston, or the gala invitations, or the degree I'd tucked away in a drawer when Gabriel said it was a distraction from more important things. Here, they saw me for who I was now. And I liked that woman. At the weekly market, I sold our first batch of bottled oil. A chef from a local taverna stopped by our booth, tasted a sample on fresh bread, and ordered a dozen for his kitchen. Soon after, we had a list of customers. Small ones, sure, but real. You make us young again, Nico said, handing me a notebook filled with scribbled orders. Now we build future. One night, we sat under the grapevines with a pot of grilled octopus and a bottle of wine too strong for its own good. The sea shimmered below, and music drifted from the village square. Elena leaned in, more serious than usual. We are old, she said. Soon, the trees need new hands. Young hands. Your hands. I blinked. Are you saying? She nodded. We want you to stay. Share business. Share home. My breath caught. I looked at Nikos, who just smiled and raised his glass. I know people, he said. We make papers. Official. No problem. For a long time I didn't answer. Because the truth was, I hadn't dared dream of permanence. But suddenly, here it was, offered not as charity, but as a partnership. A future. And then, in that perfect stillness, I knew something had shifted. Not just in the olive grove. In me. Later that night, I stood in front of the small mirror above the kitchen sink. The woman staring back at me was tan, with calloused hands and sun-bleached hair. Her eyes were steady. She wasn't hiding anymore. And for the first time, she looked free. It had been nearly 2 months since I'd checked my email. I didn't miss it. Not the endless threads about charity dinners or real estate updates. Not Gabriel's carefully curated digital life. But that morning, after harvesting olives in the soft mist of dawn, something nudged me. A whisper. A knowing. I opened the old laptop Elena's niece had lent me and connected to the cafe Wi-Fi down the road. Hundreds of unread messages flooded in. There were concerned emails from friends back in Boston, some genuine, some nosy. A message from my former mentor, inviting me to apply for a remote design consultancy position at a sustainable building firm. And then, Gabriel. The subject line read, "Where are you? We need to talk." I clicked, my heart calm in a way that surprised me. The email was brief, arrogant in its tone, as if nothing had happened. I know where you are. I'm flying in. Let's put this whole tantrum behind us and come home. I booked a car from Athens to your village. Be ready. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, but I didn't reply. Instead, I walked down the hill to Elena and showed her the email. She read it slowly, lips tightening, then folded the paper and placed it on the table. Time is right, she said. You stay. You build. But first, you close. Later that afternoon, I called Katerina, a Greek lawyer recommended by one of our customers at the taverna. She was brisk, efficient, and refreshingly blunt. You want divorce. Fast. Clean. Good. We started the paperwork that day, in both Greek and English. She even arranged to meet Gabriel in person with me, if necessary. I could see the flicker of admiration in her eyes when I explained everything. Not pity. Admiration. Then I replied to my mentor's email with a simple line, I'd love to accept the position. Thank you for still believing in me. The next morning, a delivery arrived at the farm. A sleek black car pulled up, and a driver stepped out with a thin folder. I knew before I opened it what it would be. Gabriel's itinerary. His hotel reservation. A brief message. See you soon. Let's be adults about this. I laughed. Not cruelly. Just, honestly. Because Gabriel still didn't understand what had changed. That evening, I braided my hair and wore a linen dress I'd bought from a local vendor. Nothing fancy. But I stood taller in it than I ever had in designer heels. As the sun dipped low, casting gold across the orchard, I saw a dust trail in the distance. Gabriel had arrived. Gabriel stepped out of the car like he was walking onto a red carpet, pressed blazer, expensive loafers, sunglasses too dark for dusk. His eyes scanned the grove until they landed on me. He blinked. "Alexis?" I didn't answer. Just stood still, letting him look. His jaw shifted. "God, what happened to you?" I smiled, just a little. "I woke up." He took a step forward. "Okay, you've made your point. You've been off-grid, punished me, found your little farm fantasy. But it's time to stop playing house and come home." "Home?" I asked softly. "You mean Boston? The townhouse I decorated but never owned? The life where I had to ask for permission to use my own credit card?" He hesitated. "It wasn't like that. You misunderstood." "No, Gabriel," I said. "I understood perfectly. You left me stranded in a foreign country with nothing but €80 and a wedding ring. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That was a choice." He laughed, nervous, tight. "Look, I messed up. But we've both had time to think. You've proven whatever you needed to. Now let's get back to normal." I pulled the envelope from my bag and held it out. "This is my normal now. These are divorce papers. Already translated, notarized, and ready to sign." He didn't take them. Just stared like I'd slapped him. "You're serious?" "Deadly. This is insane. You're walking away from everything." I shook my head. "No, Gabriel. I'm walking toward something. Something real. Something mine." His voice turned cold. "You'll regret this. When this little fantasy falls apart, you'll come crawling back." From behind him, Nikos appeared quietly. He didn't say much, just one firm line in Greek. Omicron delta rho mu omicron gamma iota alpha tau eta nu alpha theta nu alpha gamma nu epsilon tau alpha iota epsilon pi iota kappa nu delta upsilon nu omicron mu epsilon tau tau eta delta sigma eta tau omicron upsilon eta lambda omicron upsilon. The road to Athens gets dangerous after dark. Gabriel looked between us, then finally, slowly, backed away. He opened the car door, paused, and muttered, "You'll see I was right." But as his car disappeared down the dusty road, a peace settled over me so deeply it felt physical. Back inside, Elena stirred tomato sauce over the stove. Nikos uncorked a bottle of last year's wine. We didn't celebrate. We just lived. That night, I finished labeling a batch of oil. My name was on the back, small, in cursive, designed by Alexis. As I carried the boxes to the front room, I glanced out at the olive grove. The tree swayed in the breeze, golden under the moonlight. Gabriel had once tried to break me. But in doing so, he had freed me. And here, beneath a sky full of stars, I had finally rooted myself. Not in a man. Not in a marriage. In a life of my own choosing. Alexis's story isn't just about betrayal. It's about what happens when a woman dares to start again, with nothing but her courage and her will. She was abandoned, humiliated, left with no safety net. But instead of breaking, she rebuilt. And in doing so, she became someone her husband could no longer control, someone even she hadn't fully met yet. Now it's your turn. Have you ever had to reinvent yourself after betrayal? What did you learn when you stopped waiting for someone to come back? Let us know in the comments, your story matters. If you loved this, comment 2. If you think Gabriel deserved more, comment 7. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more stories like this, only on EN True Tales. And next week, wait till you hear what happened when a daughter sold her mother's house, behind her back.